These 7 mistakes are slowing you down as a self-taught piano player. So today I'm going to teach you how to identify each one and fix it fast. And then at the end, I'm going to teach you 3 things every self-taught pianist can't live without. Mistake number 1 is being lazy about the details. I'm talking specifically about dynamics, how loud and soft you play, articulations, which is how you play the notes, and difficult rhythms. These are the details that really bring out the life in your piano playing. So while it does make sense to just concentrate on the notes for the first few playthroughs, you do want to start adding in these details sooner rather than later. One easy solution to this, if you're not used to this, is to mark down all of the dynamics and really have a few playthroughs just working on getting the right volume. Same goes with articulations. Mark them down and make sure that you're spending ample time adding them in. If I play this passage without any articulations, it's going to sound like this. But if I pay attention to the articulations, it's going to sound more like this. And how to solve the difficult rhythms is whenever you identify a measure where you don't know how to count the rhythms, make sure that you're writing out the counting and making sure you're going through that measure, cleaning up that rhythm. Mistake number 2, and I want to tell you a story about this one. So back when I was in music school, there was this passage of music, I think it was in the Pathetique Sonata Movement 2, that no matter how much I practiced it, it just sounded sloppy and that something was wrong with it. So one day I go to play for my teacher, Dr. Craig, rest in peace, unfortunately. He was like, well, what's the deal with this measure? And I said, well, no matter how much I play it, it just doesn't get any better. And he said, oh, what fingering are you using with this measure? And I said, I don't know. And he said, that's the problem, is that you're not paying attention to your fingering, because when you have sloppy fingers, you don't really know where your fingers are being placed. It makes it really hard to play things consistently each time, but also by making sure that you have good finger technique, it allows you to play up and down the piano a lot more effectively. So we spent the rest of the lesson him drilling in this fingering for this one measure for me, and we worked it through slowly a bunch of times, and we finally got it. Fur Elise is a great way to demonstrate the importance of correct fingers, because if I start this melody line with just any old fingering, see, it really had a disjointed type of feel to it, but if I really paid attention to the fingers, I was able to play it rhythmically and it sounded nice and fluid. Same thing with scales. That's why there's a finger cross with all your scales, is because if you played it without that, it sounds really disjointed. And one thing you really always want to avoid is using your 5th finger to play multiple notes in a row. That's automatically going to sound staccato. And any measure where they don't give you the fingering, make sure that you work out the best fingering that you're able to play up and down the piano effectively. For example, in the start of this run of notes, this A here in the right hand does not have a finger number associated with it. However, this D does. So, if I just kind of mess around with it, I go, oh, that's a A minor scale, and we're doing a little finger cross here. And it works out just perfect. Another great solution for sloppy finger technique is by learning all of your scales, arpeggios, and cadences, because they're going to teach you the proper fingering when you have scale passages, things like arpeggios as well, which are a little bit further apart, and cadences, which are simple chord patterns. Pick up this book right here. It's called Alfred's Basic Piano Library, the complete book of scales, chords, arpeggios, and cadences, and start out by learning the C major scale. Mistake 3 is inconsistent practice. So we as humans are very habitual creatures. We are creatures of habit. We like doing things the same way each time. And there's some science behind this, that it makes things easier for us to do things that way. So when you do the same thing at the same time, the same way, it builds these little pathways in your brain that your brain can just follow, and it makes things a lot easier. If you're practicing at weird times a day for different periods of time, or just maybe you practice 1 or 2 days and then it's like a month before you practice again, that's all inconsistency. That actually makes your whole life and your whole job of practicing piano harder. So ideally, you want to practice the same amount of time each day, especially when you start out. You want to practice around the same time each day. And then you also want to practice the same days each week. Now, you may be saying, whoa, Tim, I have a weird schedule. I'm a night nurse, or I have kids or something. You really did something crazy and you had kids. And it's like, what do you do then? Well, I will tell you that just focus on being as consistent, as close to 5 to 7 days a week as possible. Some of us just aren't going to be able to practice at the same time each day, but you can still get the consistency in the amount of days you practice. It would be maybe make it a little easier for you if you did pick a practice time, but just make sure that you're hitting on it each and every day. And for reference, beginners should be practicing 30 minutes each day. Intermediate students, if you've been practicing for a couple of months, maybe you finished a book or two, then you want to practice for at least 60 minutes. And then pros practice for more than 60 minutes, sometimes up to 2 to 4 hours a day. Mistake number 4 goes along with mistake number 3, which is poor focus while you practice. So if you're hitting on each day you're supposed to and getting that consistency, that's great. However, when you're practicing, it's important to be objective, making sure that you're hitting on important points each time you practice to make sure that you're becoming the most well-rounded musician you possibly can. And a solution to this is pretty easy. You want to start making a checklist with all the important topics you need to hit on while you practice. And at the top of the list, I would include the measures and passages you struggle with the most. So remember earlier I said, mark down any tricky rhythms. Well, those are the measures you're going to want to start out your practice with, because your attention span is going to be peak when you first sit down at the piano, and it makes sense to clean up as many mistakes as you can while your focus is at its highest. So start out with measures you struggle with. Next, I would include exercises, things like scales. I just mentioned those. That would be a good time to hit those in. And then right after that, I would spend a few minutes sight reading, which is reading a new piece of music from sight, ideally just 1 or 2 lines of a piece, just to get you in the usual practice of reading new things rather than practicing and then really you're relying on your memory after a while. So really you want to start out with difficult things, practice exercises, and then you want to work on sight reading. And then finally, you want to spend the remaining 20 to 30 minutes of your practice session on new pieces. And ideally, you want to work on one piece that challenges you just outside of your current playing zone. And then another one is a piece that you genuinely love to play that's going to keep your interest in playing piano at its highest, because if you're challenging yourself all the time, then you might kind of wear yourself down and you might quit piano, which is going to kind of defeat the purpose of all the effort you've put in anyway. Mistake number 5 is not learning music theory, which gives you such a much deeper understanding of the music that you're playing. It's the study of how music works and how notes relate to one another. Specifically, I would become very familiar with key signatures, chords, chord progressions, and voice leading are some of the big ones that you want to become familiar with. And luckily, I do have a lot of videos around on the channel, some courses over on my website that can help you learn a lot more about music theory. In addition to the courses over on my website, pianolessonsontheweb.com, check that out once the video is done, of course. But also you can pick up this Alfred's Essentials of Music Theory. Now, this is a great supplementary tool. It gives you a lot of worksheets to work through. However, I do find the explanations to be a little bit sparse in this book, which makes it a great supplementary tool. So you can watch my YouTube videos on music theory or take my courses on music theory and use this along with it. Highly recommend, though, that you pick this up. Number 6 is related to number 5, but it goes into more detail, and specifically not mastering your scales is going to slow you down a lot. So a scale is when you put all the notes in a key, starting from the tonic note, which is the starting note. So if we're playing C scale, our tonic is C, and we're playing from that C tonic up to the next tonic with any scale notes in between. So what that means is that, like, the key of C major has 0 sharps, 0 flats. So that means we're playing from this C to this C, and all of the white keys in between because there's no sharps or flats. So that is the key of C. The key of G, for example, has one sharp, F sharp, and that's what defines the key of G. And by learning all these, you learn about all these keys and where those notes in the key are located on the keyboard. So for example, the key of A has 3 sharps, F, C, and G. And when you play the scale, you understand that those sharps happen here and then right at the end of the scale as well. Also, like I mentioned earlier, very good for practicing basic finger crosses. And all the scales you should be aware of are in this book. Again, scales, chords, arpeggios, and cadences. Coming up is the 7th and most important mistake of them all. But first, I want to go over a few frequently asked questions that I get from self-taught students all the time. And the first one I really want to address, I get it all the time, and I know you probably want to know too, which is how long is it going to take me to learn piano, as in you? And I'm going to be honest, this really depends on your goals, because some of us really want to play like one favorite song we've ever wanted to play. And that kind of even depends, because some of us want to play Jingle Bells, and then some of us want to play like Rachmaninoff's, some sort of super complicated piece that would take a lot longer. So obviously you can tell just from, if your goal is pieces, that it can vary a lot. Same thing like whether your goal is to just be a hobbyist, to play for your own enjoyment, to be or more of a professional where you're actually like really taking on stuff to learn for some sort of performance. But I don't want to leave it all muddy like that. I do want to give you a definitive answer, and I'll tell you this. If you're brand new to piano, give it a year, right? Really give it a year. If you're a couple months in and you feel like you're behind where you want to be, that's totally fine. It does take time, and that's what I want to say. Give it your all for a year. See where you're at. See what you're able to play. I'm willing to bet after a year, you're able to play something that you genuinely are proud of or genuinely enjoy, or at least maybe you're on the road to doing that. And maybe you've learned the skills to be able to learn something you can be really proud of. So really just give it your all for a year. See where you're at. Don't compare yourself to others or some ideal of where you think you should be. Learning piano is a long-term thing for the most part. If you want to learn one piece, that's fine. But if you want to learn it for the long haul, then the mentality is, I just want to learn. That's really where you got to be. Question 2 I get all the time is, do I need a teacher as a self-taught pianist, or how do I get feedback and track my progress? So first I want to tell you, you don't absolutely need a teacher to make progress. You can learn quite a lot on your own. However, I will tell you the benefits of having a teacher is getting that feedback and just having somebody with extra expertise being able to look over your stuff and give you valuable advice. But you don't absolutely need that, and if you don't have the resources to do that, don't worry about it. There are some things you can do instead that'll help bridge the gaps a little bit. The first solution I have for you is to have a list of objectives. Remember, we talked about that earlier, where you're writing in like, okay, what are the things you struggle with? What are some of the things that you have to hit on each practice? Keep that list of objectives and update it as you complete goals. So sometimes on your objective sheet, you may say, learn the C major scale. Well, someday you'll have that learned and you'll cross it out and write a new objective. And what I'm trying to tell you is the ones you cross out over time, keep. And what I want you to do is after a month or a year or however long it is, go back and look through all those things you crossed off. And that's a way that you can tell, physically on a piece of paper that I'm making progress or you're making progress. So keep a list of objectives, and even the ones you cross out, go back eventually and look through those and see the progress you've really made. And then also another great thing is to record yourself on your phone or, something like that. There's a lot of free software out there. If you have a computer nearby, a lot of laptops can record right off the jump. So make sure you set something up. And it doesn't need to be complicated. My setup, you can just set up literally a phone somewhere in the room, record yourself and listen to yourself back. And you'll be able to pick out more mistakes than you would just by actively playing, because now you're actively listening instead. So you're taking on the role of the teacher. Also, by recording yourself and keeping the recordings, you can go back and listen to your recordings from a month ago, 3 months ago, a year ago, and really be able to hopefully see some sort of meaningful progress, at least in certain areas. The last frequently asked question is, I'm losing interest in learning. What do I do? Okay, so remember this. There's a reason you started learning in the first place, and I want you to write that down. And anytime you're feeling like you want to quit, I want you to re-engage with that reason. Okay, it can be your grandmother played a tune for you when you were a little baby and you remember that tune and you miss your grandma and you want to learn that tune to connect with your grandma, right? So write that down, because that's something very meaningful to you that you can go back and be like, oh yeah, there was a whole point to this. It wasn't just me beating myself up through this practice. There was literally a goal that I was trying to achieve that's meaningful to me. It could be a thing like a teacher inspired you, or maybe you just love Taylor Swift and you want to learn piano like Taylor Swift. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want, but whatever that one or two reasons is, write it down and reconnect with it when you're feeling demotivated. Also, things like keeping track of your progress over time can keep the motivation up there. And then also, I always say this, and I said this earlier, you want to learn one piece that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, where you're learning new, meaningful stuff. But then you want one piece, at least, of something you just love to play, that keeps your interest high, that you look forward to when you go to play at the piano. And by integrating all these things, that is the best advice I can possibly give you on maintaining interest in the long term learning piano. Now it's time for the most critical mistake that you're making as a self-taught piano player. And if you fix this, it's going to make a world of difference. And remember, right after this, I'm going to teach you about 3 things every self-taught piano player can't live without. But for now, this mistake is not practicing sight reading. So sight reading is being able to look at a piece of music for the first time from sight, being able to play through it beginning to end with as few mistakes as possible. A great way to learn sight reading is through a book like this, Improve Your Sight Reading. You can find this on Amazon. It's by Paul Harris. There are 7 levels, I believe, and this is level 3. Now for some tips on how to get the most out of sight reading. Number 1 is you want to be sight reading something that's a little bit below your current playing level. So if the music you're playing looks like this, then your sight reading should probably look a little bit more like this. And why we sight read is that by sight reading, we are training ourselves to read new pieces of music regularly, which is a skill that you can develop. So if you just learn a piece or two and you practice it for months and you memorize it, well, you probably do sight read it at first, but most of it you're playing from memory or muscle memory. But sight read will make you sharp at looking at new pieces of music and being able to play them instantly if you're good at sight reading. And it can make learning piano 10 times easier, 10 times faster, and actually 10 times more fun, because the stuff you're going to be playing is actually going to sound like music and not just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's time for 3 things self-taught piano players can't live without. All right, did you like that? Well, the first one I have for you is a lesson book, a teacher, or a course. Now, if you have a teacher, maybe you're not self-taught anymore. But if you, like, for example, have a teacher at your school or your church that can listen to you play once in a while, and maybe you don't just take lessons from them, you just have them listen to you, I suggest you do that wholeheartedly. Picking up a piano lesson book like this Alfred Adult All-in-One course is something I highly recommend. I also have a course over on my website, pianolessonsontheweb.com, actually a bunch of courses, to learn piano in a very structured way. Both of these accomplish that. And yeah, highly, highly recommend that you have a book or course or a teacher. Next thing students can't live without is a metronome, which helps you keep an even timing because it provides a series of clicks or beeps at a regular interval. You can turn it slow, and you can make it super duper duper fast. Now, it's great to play along with, although it will take some time to get used to, because it will help you play more accurate rhythms. It will help you identify problem areas, because you'll get to a point where you can't keep up with this anymore. And it will just help your rhythm be more precise in general. It also helps you count at an even pace, because one thing we tend to do as piano players is we begin at a speed, and sometimes we get a little faster or slower without knowing it, and the metronome is the way to go. Now, the question you probably have is, Do I have to practice this every time I practice? No. In fact, I don't recommend you do it every time. I recommend you learn some of the notes first, get the rhythms basically down. And then this is really a tool for like cleaning things up. So if you're like cleaning up your scales, for example, you can do that by setting this to a speed. You know, you hit on. And you can play your scales or whatever it is along with it. Now, it might have been slightly out of sync here just because of my setup, but trust me that you're playing a note for each one of those clicks. And by the way, the little numbers on here are called BPMs, beats per minute. So if you set it to 60, guess what? That's a beat every second, right? Because that would be 60 even counts in a minute, and that's where you would put it right there, and that's how it works. Okay, and the third thing, we touched on this a little bit earlier, and I recommend you watch that part of the video again. It's where I was talking about the practice list that you should have, and generally what's on your practice list. So you need a practice list, and it needs to be objective, right? And what that means is that there's a list of things on there that you want to hit on each and every time you practice so that you can make the best results possible. And what I recommend right off the top is to start with an exercise. So something like a scale or a Hanon, something like that, or Czerny's another good collection of examples. I recommend starting with scales. So you might start out with scales, and then I recommend you do theory, some sight reading, and then one piece that challenges you. It includes something you knew you've never played before, and then another piece that actually is just something you really enjoy to play, and that's to keep your motivation high. So there's a skill that I really think all self-taught piano players need to have mastered like the back of their hand, and that is how to read music. A lot of students think they can skip reading music, but you can't. So if you want to learn everything you want to, or everything you need to about reading music, check it out right here. It's been your piano teacher, Tim, here, and I'll see you next time.